And we're back with Craig Dudnick, filmmaker, Evanston. Evanstonite, what is it? What is it when you're from Evanston? What are you?
Evastonian.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Not many people do.
No, no. I mean, I've been through there
Yeah.
a lot. I only stopped once or twice because I was on the train and going down to Chicago. So it's like, oh, this is another place to, go past.
Yeah, but they had serious problems with racism. This one story, I just read a book about an Evanstonian from the 20s, and his father had appendicitis, African American.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you were black, you couldn't go to the Evanston hospital. You couldn't get an ambulance if you were black. So he had to get a cab and go to the Cook County Hospital, which ended up being a 2-hour drive, and he died on the way just because of the racism and the segregation. So this is up north.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is the...
Oh, you can imagine, okay, this is from my childhood, okay? There was this big scare. You're going to have to be bussed. What? What is that? What? Because we're close enough to we could walk to school. What do you mean bussed? They're talking about this. We got to stop this. And I'm like, what is that? What do you mean bust? I don't know what that means. And that just...
Well, you have a lot of history in Virginia, because I had a screening in Farmville.
Mm-hmm.
And at the Moton Museum,
okay,
which used to be the Moton High School, where Barbara Johns in the early 50s led a walkout of the students, which later became Brown versus Board of Education, in protest of the terrible conditions in the black schools.
Mm-hmm.
She faked everybody out and said there was an assembly meeting. And then she called to protest this young woman and contacted Thurgood Marshall and the other
mm-hmm.
attorney working with him. And very significant, in the history. But what ended up happening was, in Virginia, you had massive retaliation. The state didn't go along with it, and they closed the public schools.
Yeah.
And if you had the money, you could have private schools. But for a lot of African Americans, they ended up starting high school at age 22 because the schools had been shut down. And Robert Kennedy made a famous speech showing those parts of the world that didn't have public education, including Virginia, he said.
Mm.
But... it was this is not ancient history. This
No.
has been playing out, and nothing was.
Yeah, I only heard little bits and pieces. It was like, what's going on?
Well, Barbara Johns, they had like 4 classes going on in the auditorium
mm-hmm.
at once. They had like potbelly stove for heat, and the White High School had all these incredible facilities. Everybody's paying the same taxes.
Yeah.
And this young woman just foresaw, she said, we're not going to tolerate this. Then they offered to build a black high school, no, we're not doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And see, the problem that they had was they tried to go, and this ties into the Evanston film in a way, because they kept trying to get anti-lynching legislation.
Oh, okay.
And it was going nowhere because the Senate, the Southern senators kept blocking it.
Hmm.
So this man, Charles Hamilton Houston, who was mentor for Jourdain, started the law school at Howard University, and he foresaw of going through the Supreme Court instead of the legislature to get the heavy segregation rules undone. Now the Evanston community got together with the descendants of Emmett Till.
Mm-hmm.
This is the descendants of Mr. Crawford from Evanston, got together with the descendants of Emmett Till and Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman's descendants who were murdered in 1964 in Mississippi, to lobby the United States Senate for an apology for not backing anti-lynching legislation. Going back 70 years, the President and the House of Representatives have backed anti-lynching legislation. It was always vetoed by the Senate. I think it was something like 200 bills vetoed by the Senate. So in 2005, the Senate formally apologizes for not backing anti-lynching legislation. This is the first American government apology for anything regarding slavery or lynching.
Wow.
So this is, this ongoing.
So Evanston, your second film, Evanston is Living History. Now that encompasses a bigger area of things?
Well, that's the story. It starts with Mr.
Okay.
Crawford, shows how this community comes up north, transforms the Evanston community. This is the American story, how the African American story, people who've been denied freedom have a depth and a commitment and an understanding and a love of freedom because they paid such a big price. I remember reading, I don't have the quote exactly, of Harry Tubman First Morning in Freedom. She described, my hand was the same hand, but it looked different. The sunlight looked golden. I thought I was in heaven. Her first morning in freedom.
Wow.
You know, so this group who's denied, who comes up north, you know, and they're facing segregated schools. They can't go to the hospitals. You know, you can't be on the fire department. If you're on the police department, you're going to have a menial role. How did they transform the community? How is America being transformed? That's the story that you get in the Evanston film. You not only get that part about segregation, but it's also the nonviolent approach to life. You know, this idea, it's not what you get in life that's going to make you happy, it's what you give. And this is the essence of the nonviolent movement. And this is what this community brings up north. And you hear in their own words. The one story, I don't know why this one really gripped me in particular. Joe Burton, who later became a firefighter in Evanston, he described a young boy with a 2-cent newspaper going to Marshall Field's, which was a big department store. He said,
oh yeah,
they didn't want African Americans in there. They didn't want even African Americans to buy anything. So they would make him, they didn't allow him to ride the elevator, go up like 7 flights of stairs with this 2-cent news. And he said, I got on the elevator anyway. And he said, the people backed up like I had, yeah. He said, the people backed up like I had a plague. And the way he described that, because I don't know if the people realized what they were doing to the young boy by that, you know, that action. And it's just on a human level, you know, it's more of what ordinary people went through, and they tell the story in the Evanston film.
Okay, I want to ask you a personal question here. What drove you to do this? You seem to be an okay guy. You're maybe white, maybe some privilege, but you know there must have been something that sparked this sense of, I don't know, outrage, sense of injustice that you had to focus on, or what was it?
Well, when I went to Northwestern, I found I had a very difficult time, and it was just one of those things where a friend of mine suggested that I join a fraternity. I was trying to play football, and it was a disaster in Northwestern. And so I just went there to sort of humor him. But there was a woman in the kitchen, African American woman. She was 76 years old, and they all called her Coach, Mrs. Viola Hillsman, and she's actually in the Evanston film. And I don't know, oddly enough, she had the same birthday as my grandmother, 8th day of August. Okay. I took to her. And I ended up joining the fraternity. She suggested that football was not a good thing for me, and not for you, that was her words. So then I joined it, and I started to work in the kitchen with her, doing the pots, and I had a lot of interaction with her. She was very organized. She didn't have much formal education, but very smart about people, and just, I don't know, I started to make A's and B's, and then I became lifelong friends. It was, you know, I went away to Syracuse, New York, where I worked at a TV station, and I remember Mrs. Hillsman, you know, they had accused her of stealing, and they weren't going to give her last paycheck. And I later found out, years later, that they just wanted to get rid of her, that they wanted a new cook, and this was how they chose to do this to a woman who'd been there, I don't know, 20 years, or, you know, devoted herself to. She cooked extra meals, Christmas meal, I mean, all kinds of, she was devoted, and like people like me, who she actually took under her wing and helped. And so I went back and confronted them, you know, about what they were doing, you know, got the last paycheck, but it sort of bonded us. Yeah. And then I started at a TV station, and I asked Mrs. Hillsman, I said, I want to make films, and I'm starting my work here, but I want to come to Chicago. Well, anyway, she let me stay in her basement. She was 82, caring for 2 other African-American women in their 90s. Her husband was sick. Her husband ended up coming home and passing away in my arms. So I ended up spending 20 more years with Mrs. Hillsman till I was holding her hand when she passed away at age 100. And wow. I didn't know the story of the Evanston community, but after she died, I just thought I would do, you know, some interviews with some of her friends. And one of her friends who I always ran into was a woman named Annabelle Frazier. And she was just always kidding me, oh, you're getting fat eating all of her food. And she always had something funny to say. Her grandfather was Anthony Crawford. I had no idea. You know, I had no idea of the story. I thought I was just going to hear reminiscing about old Evanston.
Yeah.
But here comes the story.
Piece of history.
Yes, the whole thing, because you wouldn't find it in the history
No,
book.
no.
You know,
Some
and
people.
that's when I said, well, let's do this story. And then Alice Tregay saw that one and said, I've got another story for you.
So there's going to be a third story, I have a feeling.
You never know.
Okay, so that's tonight at 6 o'clock. Please call the library, 483-3098, option 0. As they said, they need to know how many refreshments to serve. Refreshments are at 6, and the movie presentation is at 6:30.
Correct.
So thank you very much, Craig Dudnick, for
Thank
being here,
you.
and I appreciate your time, and this is a wonderful
Thank
time.
you for the work that you do.
Wonderful story.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.